So we still have quite a few questions overall about eligibilities. If y'all could close your computers for me, that'd be great. Thanks. And so we're going to go over that whole process this morning. So the purpose of this, and based on our needs assessment that we did at the end of last year and the beginning of this year, and our data from the buddy audits and everything, that we need to go over how to do eligibilities again and start to finish the whole process.
So this is looking at the specific eligibility packet. There will be a second training that looks at the criteria worksheets because they're a whole beast in themselves.
When are you getting this?
Yes, I will email it out after.
Yeah, so we're getting, this PowerPoint is going to be sent to you all, and it's being filmed, so the video of this whole presentation will also be uploaded so that if you do have additional questions, you can go back and watch the video also to catch back on any of the like side comments or the ad-lib stuff that we've inserted in that's not written on the PowerPoint.
Okay, standard operating procedure. First, for Verina, this is how it works at Verina. You know, we put them in the Google Doc. This year, there's been a slight change, and you are filling out the planning worksheet right after you put them in the Google Doc. And then our social worker and psychologist are going off of the planning worksheet. That's one way they can see what their present levels are to see if they want to do testing. Okay? So you're going to complete the student evaluation planning worksheet. Make sure the psychologist and social worker are checking the file to see if we need a psych or soc. And then if they say no, you need to at least do an educational and an observation for every re-eval. There is an observation form in season. We'll show you where that is shortly. And the educational report we will show you as well. Send an email to appropriate staff to alert them that you're opening up an eligibility. Make sure you think of Dr. G if your student has speech. And John Markey is our current psychologist, and Shanita Williams is our social worker for the entire year. When everyone is in agreement, you contact the parent, see if they are comfortable moving forward with the components that were selected. If they want to have a meeting, you can. And then schedule the eligibility meeting once all components are completed. Sarah?
Yes. So we shouldn't pay any attention to the yes or no columns in the evaluation spreadsheet. You know how like it says at the top?
Yeah, that's for them to fill out.
Okay.
So if they want to do a psych, they'll say yes. If they want to do a soc, they'll say yes.
Okay. So
Speech.
just mainly focus on the email
You're
between
just-
us and them.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And then we're going to go over the actual planning worksheet too during this. Yeah, but so
They've been doing a good job of letting case managers know when they want to
Yeah,
do a psych.
I got an email that said, why did I put a Y in the psychological? And I was like, I didn't, I don't know where it came from. And
Yeah.
it was a good, we communicated and fixed it. So
they're very open with
Yeah.
communication, so.
Okay, so when do we do a psychological or a social evaluation? When a student comes from a different state, it's an automatic, unless they've lived in Henrico County before and happen to have one in the file. If the file is missing a psychological or a social, and we've seen this come up several times, which becomes an increasing issue with MDRs. If the team suspects that there's a new disability or the disability category has changed, you need to do a full. Or if you're considering terminating services. So if you think that they have compensated beyond their disability, so we're no longer seeing signs of their disability, we need to do a full before we consider terminating. If you have any questions, talk to the psychologist or social worker. Okay. Before we go into detail about the different components of the eligibility, we're going to do a quick eligibility review. So if you brought it on paper, fabulous. If you have it on your computer, that's fine too. Just look at one of your eligibilities and you're going to look at this checklist and tell me if you have all the pieces.
Oh, no, I don't know what those are.
Yeah.
Wait, so I gave
You're
you,
fine.
did I give you a good one? Is that right? That's right, that's
Yes.
right? They had some extra pages shoved in there. Yeah, that makes some sense.
Yeah.
This one? Yeah. Did you get one?
Sarah,
So on the slide before you said, we have to do a psych or a social for the kids that are coming outside of the state. What about this whole process for kids that are coming from a different county?
They don't always need one, sometimes they need one if there isn't one in the file.
Okay, so what about just the entire eligibility process?
We may need to do an educational because they're from outside the county and we don't have the data. Or if we didn't get a psych or social and there isn't one in the file, then that's when we have to do it.
Okay.
But Hanover County's been good about sending them.
We were just getting confused Chesterfield's.
Yeah.
You can only do an IEP if all that's in there within the first 30
Yes.
days.
Yeah. And Dr. Markey's been really good about calling and tracking down psychologicals and socials. And for some reason, when he says, this is Dr. Markey, they send them.
So, just answering these quick 7 questions, yes or no, does it have a consent? Is the consent signed and dated? Or the attempts to contact made, etc.? Yes or no, just a quick check. So instead of doing one as a group, we want you guys to have your own so that you can double check, even though we know we just saw these in our file.
Yeah. So that fresh in your mind.
If you want your eligibility with you, piece of paper, copy, if not, you can just go on your computer. Just do a quick check, like yes or no kind of thing. While you guys are going through this, today during all lunches, I'm gonna be in 406. If y'all have additional questions from today, and you want any further clarification, you can come to 406 during your lunch today, and I'll go through one with you. If you have one coming up, or any other questions involving eligibilities, I can help out during lunches today.
And she can help with criteria worksheets then too, if you have questions about specific criteria worksheets.
Consent, like consent for.
To test.
To test.
What is this educational report? You just mean,
I mean, I want these other documents, so
Just
the
know
only reason why it doesn't
The free
have
portion always be with it.
consent is because
And we're gonna go.
he's not gonna give it to his mom to get her to sign it.
Or if the parents would have signed.
It's me,
No
I'm
signature.
I don't have a signature, but I'm also assuming that he's a special case, because he's all cases.
So, yeah, that's weird.
What is the summary statement?
It's in the minutes.
Is there like a summary of all the different components? Yeah. Over here. I put that and then I put in, like the observation information that comes from the eligibility testing. It's listed, I think, on the report also. I either put that there or down under observation, I put observation for top and then observation for classroom. And I put both down there. No, because this is just the eligibility. Yeah, you're just putting Google Docs. You can type here, what it said as far as the below average, above average, very low average. That word and verbiage that they use, you can put that in there. sometimes those looking at it, if you don't know what the numbers mean, but they can read the whole average part and know better. It doesn't always fit that small spot. See?
Okay, so now we're gonna move through each piece of the eligibility packet and hopefully clarify those questions that you had about your specific eligibilities.
So the student planning worksheet, like Sarah said, it has to be completed at least 2 weeks prior to you gaining consent to give the all component team members a chance to look through the file and then look at this to see what their placement is as far as their strengths and their weaknesses. Rule of thumb though that works for me so that I don't get caught up in forgetting to do the planning worksheet, because it's not part of the package, so it's easy to forget to do, is in the beginning of the year when we have to put all of our names into the Google Doc that need a reeval with the dates so that they can look at it. I go ahead and fill out the planning worksheet then so that it is completed already, because it's not date sensitive or anything. It just has to be an overall summary performance, so it doesn't have to be what's happening currently in their classrooms.
And you do have to pull it in now, it no longer automatically populates with the packet.
So sorry for the small screen over here, but if you go to Forms Packet, the planning worksheet is down at the bottom. So you can click on it here under Forms Packet and fill it out, and then drag it into the eligibility packet, or you can pull it into the eligibility packet and then fill it out. Either way, it's gonna be a part of the packet once it's filled out or not. Does anybody want me to go through that part? Again, Stuart? All right.
You just have to pull it in for packet. Okay.
Oh, if it has already been pulled in from like a previous eligibility, then that's fine, but any new ones that you have or a new person to your caseload that maybe the person before hadn't pulled it in, you wanna just make sure that you pull it in from Forms Packet, and like I said, you can fill it out ahead and then pull it in, or pull that form in and then fill it out. Same with the observation form that we'll get to. It's separate.
And this is 2 weeks before you do the consent for testing?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Because you're looking at what their present levels are. Are they currently showing growth? What do their grades look like? That way the psychologist and the social worker can look at that data and say, okay, do we feel like there might be a change in disability?
All right. And this is something, I'm not on my screen, over here. This is something that does not go home to the parent. So it's one of those forms, and we have a slide at the end that shows everything that should be in the eligibility packet, and then what actual pieces go home, because not everything's gonna go home. So this is one of those things that's in the packet that goes in the file, but does not go to the parent. And again, this PowerPoint we'll post to you guys so that you can see it later if you need to. Are there any new areas of need that may be affecting progress? So a lot of times when you're filling this out, this is where it might be harder to do in the beginning of the year, because you may not know if they have poor attendance yet, if their homework is off, if they have general work habits. But a lot of times we know that by at least the first month of school when we have to have these kinds of things into the Google Doc for eligibility anyway, so we have time to work on that. Does the committee suspect that there's a new additional or different category? This is an example from an elementary, so this is check yes, but mainly and mostly it's gonna be no. In the high school, they're not really ever introduced to a new disability category. It's rare.
But an example of this is if they've been OHI and you think they might qualify for ED and that might serve them better, you might see a change.
And if that's the case, then you have to have a complete workup, and that's where the social worker and the psychologist like to know those kind of informational pieces. Based on the information discussed, what components are recommended by the team recommends a full, or the team recommends only educational and observational. And a lot of times, like we were talking about with that open communication with Markey and Williams, they will email you before you even talk to the parent to be like, I'm thinking they're gonna need a psychological, I've looked at their stuff, they're gonna need a social, so you'll know what to put.
So if you're just doing a file review, it's okay to say the team recommends a file review.
And that's a place where you can document your inability to get in touch with a parent or whatever reason you're doing a file review.
So this part, I think, Jen, is this what you were talking about earlier? The checkoff parts?
I have a question about that too, but yeah.
Okay. So we are the ones that always check educational, and we've reviewed it, and we always check observation, and we've reviewed it, because we're the ones doing the educational, and we're always the ones doing the observation. This is the example that I have on a recent one that I've done. You don't want to recommend the psychological or the social. It's up to the evaluator, which is the psychologist and the social worker, to say that they've reviewed it. And once they've reviewed it and they think it needs to happen, they'll check it off on your worksheet, so that you know when you send home the consent for testing that you check off the appropriate boxes.
So we don't have to do anything on that page. So that's basically everybody else except us, so we don't have to touch that page.
We do touch educational and observation.
So if they mark reviewed and they don't want it done, the box on the left should not be checked.
It should not be checked, and they will have also communicated to you that they don't think it needs to be done. It should be in the Google Doc that we filled in the beginning of the year. They should put no. Sometimes it gets close to time and they forget to go back to that, so it's okay to reach out to them and say, you know, I'm about to send consent home and I haven't heard back from you about XYZ student.
That makes more sense.
Consent, you take whatever components were selected in the component selection, mark them on your consent page. You are going to write a statement on what's going on with the student and why we're recommending an educational and observation or a full evaluation. And then anything that was rejected. So those are things that we decided not to do. So we're not doing a psychological and a social because there is one in the file that is up to date. This is very important, and we saw this come up a lot in the file reviews where parents did not check consent, they just signed. We cannot test unless they check consent. So when you get it back, make sure you have that check mark and that it's signed. Okay.
And if it's signed and not checked, just call them and let them know that they didn't check one of the two and have them come do that. Really quick with the observational form, does everybody know where it is for the eligibility? So it's under forms, eligibility forms, and then it's kind of like placed in the middle there. Fill it in, and then drag it to the eligibility packet, or you can drag it to the eligibility packet and then fill it in there.
I have a question
thing.
about the observation. So I try to observe the kid in whatever class is related to their disability, but then like, let's say, like I only have fifth off this year. What if they have gym during fifth?
Yeah.
When do I go and observe?
You can also ask a counselor to go do it. A
Okay.
lot of times they're willing to help out and do your observation for you.
Okay.
It's just a 15 to 20 minute observation. And I would be willing, if it's a block that I'm off, I'd be willing to come sit in your class for 15 minutes so you can go do an observation. That's not a problem.
Can you observe your own student while you're teaching them?
Best practice, they want us to observe them while someone else is teaching.
A lot of times their behaviors too are different if it's not you.
Right.
Yeah. All right, so what happens if? What happens if educational testing scores are all average for a student and they're not showing a weakness in anything when you do the Woodcock-Johnson scores and everything looks great? Contact Dr. Markey or whoever the school psychologist is going to be in a couple months because he's going to want to look at those results and see if we need to have a full eligibility. Okay. The student is no longer exhibiting behaviors consistent with the ED. Again, once you go through that checklist and you realize he is not making enough consistent marks with the ED, then again, consult the school psychologist. And then be sure you do have the data to support it. So a lot of times with ED students, you have the data from the classrooms on how they're acting. You have your teacher marks, observations. You're not sure what information to use to answer the questions on the criteria worksheet. This is a little hairy because a lot of times you're not going to know how to answer some of these. But you need to look at the previous report or contact Dr. Markey. If you're concerned with a student, like I have a student coming up that I'm concerned with how to fill out the criteria worksheet for an ED student, I'm having him come to my meeting. Ms. Phillips is coming to help me work through the worksheet. You can also get them to look at it ahead of time so that you understand when you're going through it during the meeting if he's not a specific component to the IEP meeting. Does that make sense? Before the meeting, who to invite? The parents, obviously, send the meeting notice home. 2 weeks prior is obviously ideal. A lot of times we cannot get in touch with the parent at all, but do your best to give the parent as much notice and the rest of the team as much notice as possible. The gen ed teacher always has to. You can't have a meeting without them there. Same with an administrator. Related service, Dr. G, OT, PT, school psychologist and social worker, if they had a component. They don't need to be there if it's just an educational and an observation. Something that's a little different, you are the chairperson. So we were really, really spoiled. Those of you that know Sloan, when she was here as our school psychologist, she would just take the eligibility meetings and run with them. And she went through everything. She went through the checklist with you. She went through the reports, the data. She talked to the parent. You just kind of facilitated and typed. That's not happening anymore. We are the ones to do the entire meeting. We are chairing the entire meeting. We go through everything. We talk about it. We discuss it. And present it to the parents.
You don't need a special ed teacher, right?
You, as a case manager, can also be representative as ed teacher. It'd be ideal because a lot of times you don't even teach that student, so if you can get one, that would be good.
You don't need a school counselor though. They are not part of the eligibility team. They're always a good person to have because they have a different perspective. But if they can't make it, you can proceed with that. Yes?
Can we get a teacher that can't be excused, is that what you said earlier?
Our kids
I know
don't,
it's difficult
like,
for you guys.
my kids don't have a gen ed
They may
teacher.
have one
We don't have
or
any.
none, and that's a different case.
Okay, I mean,
Yeah.
it
Is
is
Mr.
okay.
Henshaw not?
He can't, he's never,
He's never available. He's always
You
taking
can
other
put
classes
him
at
on
other
your
schools.
excusal form and say that he
Yeah.
we
has
usually
class.
do that, but that's
That's fine.
okay? Okay.
They just have to be a team member. You can't just not have them there.
Got it.
You know, like you can excuse a parent sometimes and stuff like that.
Okay.
You can never excuse, though, an administrator.
Got it.
All right, so forms to complete at the eligibility. Definitely the meeting minutes. That is under the eligibility packet. I don't want to be in y'all's way.
One thing that I do, because in C's it's kind of a hot mess how the forms populate, I always, first thing I do before I type in anything is move the forms I need to the top so they're all together. So move your meeting notice, consent,
And I'm opposite for the same thing. I chunk them together, but I just move them all to
the bottom.
the bottom. I kind of move them wherever they're closer because it's really tedious to click the arrow and move and move and move and move. I wish you could just click and drag. So you have to complete the eligibility meeting minutes, and Sarah's going to go through the actual form in a minute and tell you exactly what needs to be filled out for it. But definitely the criteria worksheets, only the worksheets that the student has a disability for. You do not have to go through all of them, ED, OHI, vision, if they don't have that. Just pertain to their disability.
I have a quick question. So some of our kids also have multiple disabilities, so in that case, do we need to complete like the orthopedic and speech and I do we need to do
Yeah.
all of those before we do multiple? Or if they've already been previously
Just
identified
do what
as
they've
multiple?
been identified
What they're
for.
identified as.
Okay.
Yeah. If there's a concern about a new or different category of disability in the meeting, then make sure that the paperwork is based on the current eligibility category. You don't want to go through a checklist of the additional ones. You'll have to reconvene to have that meeting because you have to have a full eligibility done. Don't change the disability category without an updated psych and soc. That's the same thing as adding one. And then, of course, the prior notice, which is written, the student was due for a triennial reeval, and she'll go through that.
Okay, eligibility meeting minutes. Make sure that you have 3 levels of contact with a parent and it's documented here. Also, make sure that you fill in the reevaluation meeting initials you guys don't usually deal with. Purpose of the meeting, check the boxes that you need. You need to complete the summary for the educational and the observation. And your summary should not be copied from the WJ4 printout. It should be, they're showing weaknesses in these areas and going into detail what that looks like. You can pull it from the language of the observation report, which is kind of a format for you. But don't pull it from the WJ printout because that's just messy looking. No.
So not the parent summary
No.
on that report?
Because it's just going to say they sat in their seat and listened and didn't throw a fit while we were testing. Where we want to see what their weaknesses and strengths
So you
are.
just look at you're just basically looking
You're looking at the
scores and
scores.
interpreting and then writing.
Yes.
Okay, that's right.
So
Yeah.
basically, you're just explaining.
So if they're
Yes.
average or based on.
Yes, their strengths
Low
are in
average.
reading comprehension and reading fluency, and their weaknesses are in math calculations and broad math. There was 1 standard deviation away from whatever.
Just so I'm clear, for parent notification, you have to have all 3 forms.
Ideally, especially if you think the parent, you're not going to get in touch with the parent.
Okay.
We have to send,
But if you reach them on the phone and you sent the letter,
yeah,
that's
you're fine.
suffice.
If you ever suspect you're going to have an eligibility without a parent present, you have to mail home a meeting notice in the mail. Okay?
Is that the case even if the student's 18?
No, the student's 18, that's different, because the student's their own educational signer. You should also complete the observation form in C's and include it in the packet, and that goes in the cumulative file. It does not go home with the parent. Educational report, you're going to take your WJ results and put it into the education evaluation report. I updated this summer. It's on the website. I believe I put it on Schoology as well, and I will send it out today as well. So you have it.
And that's not on C's.
No.
It's like a separate Word document.
Yeah. Your educational report needs to be in the file, the cumulative file, at least 2 days before your meeting. That's just standard law. It's true for the psychological and the social, and everyone's reports have to be made present for the parent in the cum file 2 days prior to the meeting. Decision page. We're seeing a lot of people missing check boxes. I gave out a form, a blank one last year with stuff highlighted to help you remember what to check. I'm going to send that out again. But just to quickly go through it, if your student has had an IEP, they do have the presence of a disability. If your student has had an IEP, this disability has an adverse impact on their performance. Your data can be the scores on the WJ, it can be their SOL scores, it can be their grades. How you are adapting instruction is their services and their accommodations. Always choose that they have a disability, always mark yes. It shouldn't be different unless you did a full and changed the disability, and then make sure you pull it from the drop-down menus.
I have a question about, for data-driven evidence. I usually just write Woodcock Johnson scores, SOL scores, teacher observation. Like, I don't write what the scores are. I just note the things we use. Is that okay?
Yes, but use as much specific data as possible when you can.
So this is based off, like, again, an elementary school one, so it's talking very detailed about how they made progress on their reading levels and fluency and processing and speed. But this is the rationale for eligibility determination, all relevant evaluation data, strengths and weaknesses. So again, you're getting this from the Woodcock Johnson. You can get it from teachers are showing different signs of weaknesses and strengths. It does not have to be as lengthy as this. This is coming from an initial example. Recommendations, all of this is stationary. It's one drop down at the bottom. An IEP will be developed within 30 days. That is the case because once you do an eligibility, you have to do an addendum to the annual or have the annual along with it if the times and the dates match up. to insert this information into the present level of the IEP. So you are developing an IEP within 30 days.
So when you rewrite the IEP, all you have to do is rewrite the clock.
And
Yeah, if
then-
their annual's not due, just update whatever changes from the eligibility.
Okay.
So you might change their accommodations
Or services.
or
it just-
services
Mhm. But definitely the present
But you
levels.
only have to do the pages that.
that are impacted.
Okay.
Mhm. And the
Unless you
agenda.
wanna do their annual at the same time and save yourself a meeting. That's fine.
Signature page, you are the chairperson. We are not under exceptional ed teacher or other, you are the chairperson, this is where you sign, parent has to sign. This gets overlooked a lot because it's kind of tucked into the side here, but this is another parental rights packet signature, just like on the consent page of the IEP. So make sure that whether they take it or not, you've had the conversation about asking them if they want the packet, they have to initial. And then admin, gen ed, ex ed, and this is for the other component.
So if we're acting as the chairperson, we don't sign it twice for Excel, we just sign it once.
Just chair.
Mhm.
And then, yeah, you have to check consent eligibility for special education services.
And the
Here's
parent has to
consent.
sign a second time. That gets overlooked a lot. Okay. Even if the parent doesn't show up, you have a school-based meeting with a full team. And go through the eligibility results and get all the signatures, or it's not valid. Do not complete this section of the reevaluation unless there is a psychosocial component and or the student is exiting speech language services. This is discontinuing services. If you ever have a parent talking about how they want to dismiss services, just come to me first before we start moving down that road, because that looks a little bit different.
And remember, to dismiss a service, you have to have a full eligibility done. It can't just be based on the educational results. All right, so the,
I'm sorry, even if it's speech language being dismissed, you still have to.
Yes. And Dr. G is really good about communicating that. She's probably the one that dismisses services most frequently
Most
in
frequent.
high school.
so what goes home? This is everything that should be in your eligibility packet when you go to it over here. The planning worksheet, and it doesn't have to be in this order, this is just everything. The worksheet, the consent form, the meeting minutes, the results from the Woodcock-Johnson, the educational report that Sarah showed you, that Word document, the different criteria worksheets, and the prior written notice. What's not up here is the observation form, but that is also a part of the packet. The things that are highlighted are the things that go home. So the Woodcock-Johnson results that you get from the testers that they email you, or you can get off the website, they do not go home to the parent, but you do need to include them in your packet when you put them in the file, and the planning worksheet and the observation form. Those three things do not go home. Everything else does.
That's all internal communication, so it stays in the file.
But the parents can't have a copy of the results.
That's the.
No, not the actual results that we look at to interpret. If you want to print the parent report that's also offered on that Woodcock-Johnson website, they can have that. Because it's open to too much interpretation that they don't know how to
Yeah.
interpret.
Right.
I have
Causes
parents
confusion.
ask, so I just give them to them.
Just in the future, don't give them that. You can give them the
The
parental
scores are
report
all going to be in your educational report.
that you send to them
At
anyways.
the last page is all of the standard scores. And it's just formatted within language that's more accessible, that explains what each test is and what the score means, whether it's average or low average or high average or whatever. So it just makes it easier for them to interpret it.
And the observation form doesn't have to go home because you're pulling from that to put into the observation component of eligibility meeting minutes. So the whole form that we use ourselves internally doesn't need to be sent. Any questions? There's I sent it to Billups, and so I can pull it up again, I don't know where it went. It is a evaluation from today. It's, I think, 5 questions evaluating the professional development training that you guys just had. If you could just fill it out and by Friday. It's a Google form. It looks like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 questions. 4 like multiple choice and 1 kind of short answer thing. Sarah's gonna send out the link sometime today, and then
I'm
if you
sending it
guys
right now if you wanna do it.
could just fill it out by Friday. Also, in case you didn't hear me say earlier, I'll be in 4 to 6 during all lunches. If you have any other questions about eligibilities, your own personal eligibility that you have coming up, anything with the criteria worksheets, I'm there to answer any of your questions or work through one with you during your lunch today in 4 to 6. And we just need your little half sheets before you go. You don't have to have like your name on it or anything like that.
Any questions? Comments, concerns? Like you said,
So based on the last eligibility PD that we did, this is the PowerPoint reflecting everything. So we can walk through this and go over it with yours.
Okay.
So the beginning, these are just the overall procedures about what needs to happen. That's just background knowledge. When is a psych or a soc evaluation considered? And you said you've already heard back from the psychologist
Yes.
and the social worker
Yes.
that neither one is needed. So therefore, in your packet, on the planning worksheet, they will have gone in and clicked that they reviewed this,
Okay,
should, and then not check on that side.
okay.
But like I said, the planning worksheet is kind of something that's not the signed consent or anything, so it's,
Just-
if they don't do it, it's
No big deal.
it's no big deal.
So what about the rest of these? If these aren't being considered, do they also have to be reviewed?
No, they don't have to be reviewed.
Okay.
Speech is if they actually have the speech services or the speech disability. OTPT is more like physical. Mhm.
Okay.
All right, so then you have that. And did you physically talk to the parent on the phone
Not yet.
about components or anything? You wanted to hear from
From
the
them
psychologist?
first.
Okay. So when you make parent contact on this sheet, you need to date the time you talk to them,
Okay.
whether you email them, phone, or you send a letter home to them. If they do not want to have a meeting, then it's waived and you click yes and you don't need the signatures. I've only had it happen once in the past 10 years where a parent's like, no, I want to come in and I want to talk about
Right, it's
these
not
different
very common.
components. It's not very
Okay.
common. So you can just go ahead and click.
So for data parent contact, should I start that before I start the planning worksheet, or should I wait until all of that comes back and?
Planning
I know what we
worksheet
need.
can be filled in, like, when I submit my names to that Google Doc and I figure out in August who I have for reval, I go ahead and I just go ahead and start the planning worksheet.
Okay,
And then as the year progresses and like the first couple weeks, I know who the student is, and I go back in and fill out what their strengths and weaknesses are from their classes, because the psychologist and social worker can't
yeah,
do anything until they review your planning worksheet. So it kind of pushes things back if it's not done already.
okay,
So as soon as you make parent contact, you should discuss it and say, the psychologist, the social worker, they've reviewed so-and-so's file. They don't feel it's necessary to have one done. However, they do need an educational and an observation done by me for their triennial.
okay.
And at that point, and if they say okay, then you can say the meeting was waived, yes, when you contacted them, and then you're ready to
And this date is when the
proceed.
65 days starts?
65 days starts when you get signed consent.
When consent is signed, okay.
Yes, so you might have made contact with them like today on the 10th, but not get the signed consent back until the week of Thanksgiving. That's when your 65 days start.
Okay,
So it's good to look at that 65-day
Yeah.
calendar to know when is the triennial due back at 65 days and really try and get like the ball rolling a little on the outside of that, because
Yeah.
the 65 days starts. And some outside services will wait and take because they're backed up
How
or
long
they
does
know they have
the
that.
educational usually take to get back?
Sometimes maybe a month.
Okay.
Depends on how many they have in the testing booklet that they have to go through. There's 3 of them, so it should roll smoothly, but
Okay,
sometimes it doesn't.
it doesn't work like that.
Right. So once you make contact, you can do that, and then at that point, you can do the consent page. So if you go to the meeting consent So this is where you check off the actual ones that are being done, which would definitely be the educational and the observation. And then you can scroll down. And then here, HCPS decided to recommend an evaluation. And you can, it says, considered and attempted the following options. So it is time for so-and-so's triennial reevaluation. The educational observation components were selected.
So we don't have to put that psych and social were reviewed but not recommended? Okay.
Because you would if the parent says, I know they've reviewed it, but I still want one done, and the psychologist might come back and say, well, they don't need one, and this is why.
Okay.
Then you put that there, and then if you scroll down, then you put it right here. There's a little spot that says options rejected, and then you would say the psych was rejected because.
Okay.
And then you give them the opportunity to check off give or do not give, sign and date. You can put your information down at the bottom. Whitney, promise also for at.
And do I have to add like Ashley's name? Like
You can add Ashley Ray there. Sometimes I put Sarah Billups,
Okay.
whichever. And then send it home. And if they have email access, you can attach it in an email. You can send it with a kid. You can mail it.
Okay.
However you want. However you know the kid and or
Is
you
gonna
know I'm
get
going to
it
get it back. Then once you get the consent back, that's when the 65 days start.
Okay.
Well, it might take a week, but you go by the date signed and consented.
So not the date I sent it, just the date that they
The date
signed
that
on
they sign on the consent
Okay.
form is when the 65 days start. So you
Okay.
hope that they send it back as soon as they sign
Yeah.
it. You can keep the original for yourself in case it goes somewhere. I never do, but it might be good practice too. And then depending on who the components are is who you make copies for. So if the psychologist needs one, in this case you don't, but then you would put one in his box.
Mhm.
If there's speech, put one in Dr. G's box.
Okay.
One always goes in the binder in 406,
Mhm.
and you sign the little log, and they test in order of the log, not in the order that the consent forms just get stuck in there, which is good because people just
We'll
pull
try to
from,
skip.
right. So they test in order of that, so you can kind of get an idea of how many people are ahead of when you put it in there.
Okay.
And then when testing is done on their end, they'll send you the report, and they'll put the signed consent back in your mailbox.
Okay.
And at that point, you can schedule the eligibility.
Meeting.
Mhm.
Okay.
All right. So moving through that,
Oh,
did you have any
quick
questions about? Yeah.
So if I have an eligibility and an IP due around the same time, I can combine them, right?
Yes.
But which one gets done, the eligibility would
Yeah,
be done
eligibility
first?
has to be done first because you have to archive that in order for the dates to stick on the cover page of the
Okay.
annual or the addendum. You can try to change it as many times as you want. It's going to revert back until the updated eligibility dates are done.
Okay.
Now, you can do an annual along with eligibility. You can do the eligibility first and then you transfer the information over, or you can do the eligibility first and do an addendum to the annual. I have one that's in the process of being done, but her eligibility is, her annual is due like Saturday. So I have to do the annual now, and I know her testing is going to be done like next week, and I'm going to have to call parents back to the table to do an addendum to the annual with the eligibility then, but it just didn't happen in time for me to have them both at the same time.
Okay.
Also, if you want, you can always have, even if the annual's not due till April, you can ask the parent, do you want to go ahead and have the annual now or just do an addendum? And you can get your annual
Out of the way.
done. But some parents don't want to, some parents like, no, things could happen. So, just have to ask. Yeah. So you're comfortable with the planning worksheet?
Yeah.
You have that filled out? Okay. We talked about the consents. Okay. Just like in the IEP team, there has to be one of everybody involved. The school counselor is not even a part of the IEP team. It's just weird to me, but they're not. It's just always good to invite them because you're talking about SOLs and credit counts, but they don't have to be at the eligibility. But if you suspect something different, but 9 times out of 10, you're also doing an addendum, so you want them there anyways in case something happens. Eligibility. Okay, so the eligibility meeting minutes. This is where you plug in. Oh, you had it on there. Oh, right there. All right, so contacting them about the meeting, having these things filled in. So when did you, the kind of like the meeting notice page that you fill in at the very bottom. They now want that stuff filled in at the top. You don't know when the initial is. This usually doesn't happen that often in high school that we have child studies this far along in their education, but you definitely want to put the reevaluation meeting date, same date as the
So
meeting
for some of
notice.
these, they actually show up in C's.
So you can go to C's on the demographics page and put it there if you want, but they're not,
It's no big deal.
you don't have to.
Okay.
You definitely have to put like the meeting date though. The purpose of the meeting is always eligibility determination, and you can put review educational progress also.
Okay.
This is where the social worker will go in and put her information there. You don't type their stuff. They go in and
They do it
input their,
themselves.
yes. The observation from the classroom, from the form, you can summarize or paste it here. The educational's there. Speech, she does her own. School psychologist, whoever they happen to be each week, does their stuff right there.
And so in this case, since he's only doing educational observation, I would only have to fill up those two. The
Everything
rest
else
would be
stays blank. Mhm.
Okay.
Yes. And then those would be if PTOT, anything else, they put their stuff under there. Okay, so this is where people forget and mess up and don't check all boxes.
Oh, that one's
Does
highlighted
the
now.
student, does the student have the presence of one or more disabilities? Yes, that's why you're here in the first place. Does the disability have an adverse impact on performance? Yes. What are some evidence? So you can use their most current grades, you can use the WJ score, so you can take, I like to type right there, their broad reading, broad math, and broad written language score there. Does the student have a need for specially designed instruction? Yes, you put either smallest teacher-student ratio, you can put self-contained, you can put proximity, like what kind of specially designed instruction do they have? As defined, the team determined that. So this is a drop-down menu that they definitely have a disability and IDEA is eligible. So you click that. Yes, they're IDEA eligible. Is this decision different? So if you're adding a category or taking something away from the last reeval, then you would click yes. 9 times out of 10, it's no. Especially in this case, because you're only doing an educational and observation. In order to change that to a yes, you would have had to have had a full reeval done, which is a psych, assoc, vision, and hearing. Yeah. And then their disability categories, make sure you're clicking the right one there. And then scrolling down, you can take their strengths and weaknesses from the reeval. You can put strengths and weaknesses from the like classroom stuff goes there. And then recommendations is that an IEP will be developed within 30 days because you're doing an addendum or an annual. So something is going to change.
Okay.
All right, and then again, you're the chairperson, so you have to sign there and date. Don't forget the parental right packet initials. A lot of people do just because it's tucked in there. And then everybody else can sign below. And then parental consent, you must have them check the top box. Counselors only use the second one usually because it's for 504. And then down here is termination. And again, in order to terminate a child services, you have to have a full.
Okay.
Yeah. And what I learned this year with the school psychologist is he said that when you are having a psychological and a social, like a full one done, you need to include vision and hearing. A vision and hearing screening, because if something is affected there, it's most likely going to affect their educational performance.
So literally everything has to be done. Okay.
Pretty much. And it's not vision and hearing as far as like the vision teacher that comes or the hearing teacher for the county. It's like they have to just have a screening done in the clinic. And
Okay.
you make a copy and give it to Miss Loveland and she takes care of it.
Okay.
To my knowledge, they just have the report and you can say they passed hearing, they passed vision, they're fine. I don't think that they have to come to the meeting, but I'm gonna double check on that too, because I have one on Monday that I'm not sure if they need speaker or not. And then that is it. You do not want them to sign or date here because that's terminating. Mhm. All right. Then the criteria worksheets.
So do we fill all of these out, or do they just
No,
need to be
just their
packet?
disability.
Okay.
They're just there.
And we can't remove them.
You can't remove them. So what we were talking about during the other PD is you move the pages you need, either all down to the bottom of this column by these arrows, or you can move them all to the top, so it's
So
easier to print.
Are these gonna move, or is it like the goals where they kind of all move together?
Yeah, so if you want, like, click deafness worksheet. If you want that as part of your packet, if you move it to the top, it moves one page
Okay.
at a time. So depending on where the majority of your pages are,
Move that way.
move that way is what I suggest.
Yeah.
So that when you print, it's easier and you're not having to be like page 1, comma, 2 through 6, like
Yeah.
it's too much.
Okay.
So in this case, you have an autism worksheet, but let's say for specific learning disability, you have to also fill in the LD addendum page. And it tells you when you're filling out the SLD worksheet, fill in the LD addendum page with it. It's because it talks more specifically about
Okay.
the learning disability itself. So you, in this case, would only be filling out that worksheet. You're supposed to do these during the meeting because you want the team input on why you're checking yes or no. You can always review it ahead of time so you're familiar with the page because you have, or now the chairperson, so you have to go through it.
Okay.
So you can always familiarize yourself, make a note off to the side so you know what you want to say, what you want input, but 9 times out of 10 you need to do it ahead of time. And this one doesn't require any write-ins, which is nice that it's just yes or no, so you just have to read through it.
So in this case, if
And
it's
ask
an
the team.
autistic child, I know we have the 2 ladies that work with autism. Can they come in and do the observation for me? Since
Yeah,
they kind
they-
of know what exactly.
Yes.
There's a specialist.
And I
in
would
it?
email them sooner than later
Yeah.
and ask them about that if they would. And then also I would ask them if they'd be willing to come to your meeting since it is a re-eval. They might have some input on better accommodations or changed accommodations or not placement school-wise, but maybe class
Yeah.
placement. So I would also see if they can come to the
Okay.
meeting too. It's Tully, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so then also the prior notice needs to be completed. So it seems like you have all yours at the bottom.
Whoever did it.
All right, so date of meeting again goes there. Oh man, I hope that wasn't really the last time we had one. Jeez. Okay, good thing you're doing it. Actions proposed or refused, and you can kind of keep some verbiage. The team proposes that so-and-so continues services under the disability category of autism, explanation of why he continues to exhibit he through the criteria worksheets. It's just 1 or 2 sentence explanations. If anything was rejected, that goes on there. Other factors that are relevant, 9 times out of 10 there are no other factors. 9 Hamlet is not the person anymore. You would put Ashley Meyer. You want to make sure that you put that on the prior notice. We talked about the eligibility minutes page. The educational report is this, so you will take the report once you get it from the testers, and you just fill in all of the red and the blue. And Phillips sent out because it's just going to give you the score. It doesn't tell you if that's very low, low average or not. So you have to look at the score and see where it falls in order to put it here. And you fill that in. It's broken down by the different broad categories. These are observations during her testing. They don't really look at this that much anymore, so I put during her class observation. I kind of tweaked it to fit
Okay.
the student, and put that there. Any recommendations based on the results? The team feels that so-and-so will continue to receive services in the collaborative setting with the following accommodations, whatever. And then you put the numbers down here. And then you. This can go to the parents. And that is on, we talked about the decision page. Okay, so what goes home, what's not on here is the observation form. We left that off by accident, but that also does not go home.
That's the observation that I would perform, the educational observation?
Yeah, so this one right here, that does not go home. It's just something that you fill out while you're observing and something that you pull into the packet because it has to go in there.
Okay.
And you use that information to put into the eligibility meeting minutes, but you don't.
Send it home.
Send it
So
home.
this
It
is
just
a
goes in
planning
the-
worksheet, or just kind of in-house for us?
Yes, they have to be in the packet, but those two pieces do not go home. Planning worksheet and the actual result
Yeah.
that we get from the testers, that stuff does not go home. Where is my? Okay. Score report. So this is what you'll get from the testers. This is where you find all of your SS standard deviation numbers to put in. So as you can see, it doesn't tell you above average, average, not. So you
So
don't.
parents aren't gonna be able to read that?
So this is what I'm talking about that doesn't go home.
Okay.
This, the meeting minutes,
And we pull the standard score?
standard score,
Okay.
yes. So going back to that, yeah, the worksheet, those results, and the observation form do not go home. So I typically try to pull everything else together, and then after the prior notice, I put the planning worksheet and the observation form, so I know, like, when I'm printing those
Take those
pages, I don't give that to the parent, but those can go in the original packet in the file.
And we just keep those in the file, or like our own little file?
No, what, the page is not going home?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, they go with the entire packet in the orange folder
But
in
the
their
parent
Cume
copy,
file,
no.
but the parent
Okay.
copy removed those
Okay.
pages. Do you have any other questions about this one in particular, or any questions about what goes home, what gets filled out, when and where and why and how? So see there's two consent for evals, always use the one that says Henrico in parentheses. They switched some to new forms, but didn't pull all the old forms out of the packets.
Okay.
And so sometimes there's doubles, and just make sure you're filling out the ones with the Henrico parentheses.
And is there like, oh no, it's on the other page, I forgot. All the signatures for everyone that's signed for the meeting.
That's on the meeting minutes, yes. Make sure that you have every necessary person.
Okay.
The gen ed, the exceptional. You can sign as the ex ed teacher as
And
well.
chairperson?
Yeah.
Okay.
But you have to have gen ed, you have to have the school psychologist, and you have to have social worker, if those people are the component pieces.
Okay.
Yeah, it just depends on who you have as components.
Okay. All right.
Okay?
Yes.
Perfect. Thanks.